Behind me is the Fiat 124 Spider, the result of a collaboration between FCA and Mazda of Japan. Most everyone already knows that this is a reskinned Mazda Miata of the ND generation. And Fiat decided they wanted to collaborate with Mazda on this because, well, they've mastered the art of the lightweight, small roadster that is extremely capable. Without totally cheaping out, without making it some compact car platform, this is a dedicated platform. And it's affordable, which is unbelievable in this day and age. Now, the thing is, with the sheet metal, Fiat wanted to do a throwback to the older Spider that they did. And to me, it looks like a Sebring convertible with all the hood lines. It just, I don't know. For me, it's a little iffy, especially when you look at the Miata side by side. But you may like this styling. It may appeal to you in that classic sense. Now I can put on my tap shoes and just tip-tap around everywhere and show you all the reskin materials, but it's pretty noticeable. The hood, the sculpted hood, the bumper, the front grille, the headlights, the fenders, all these little elements give this car a more commanding look, namely the elongated front end. But one of the best parts about the 124 is when you get this thing in your garage, you realize you just did spring cleaning because it frees up so much space in there because of the size. And I shook my head. I'm like, God, I would love to have a small car like this again because it's so practical and just compact. When you come to the Rumpleton of the 124 and you lift up this trunk, you feel this piece of plastic, which feels extremely tacked on, and it feels very loose, and you can actually see the rubber bumpers under here to kind of, I don't know, to stop it from vibrating or whatever, but that's the first thing I noticed. The trunk space, much like the Miata, is extremely usable. It's surprisingly well set up to fit probably 2 large carry-on bags, at least, and probably some miscellaneous stuff. And it's a very usable space. That's kind of the point, but it's up to you, again, to decide if it's practical enough for your purposes. Now, getting inside the 124, you'll see this pillar, and I almost always hit my head on it, and I have plenty of times, and that is because my seating position is very close to the steering wheel. And you can thank my race instructors, driving instructors, including those from Mazda, that say you should be closer to the wheel to have more control. Your elbows are less bent, which means you have less fatigue and longer driving periods. Again, more control. But what it does in here is I hit my head on the pillar, so I have to move the seat back to avoid that for safety reasons. Now, all of that aside, when you get in here for the first time, this is one of the best interiors in terms of creating a oneness with the driver and the car of pretty much anything out there without going to a high price point. There's a level of simplicity in here that you don't find with a lot of vehicles anymore. They've ditched pretty much all the bullshit. All the gimmicks are gone. And what's left? Well, you drive the piss out of this car and you feel extremely joyous when you're doing so. Now, if you're looking for exceptional levels of detail on the interior, check out my MX-5 ND Miata video from last year. A lot of this is identical, but there's a couple of things to cover. The dashboard. The level of simplicity here is pretty much, well, because it's been lifted out of the Mazda 2. You'll see so many shared elements there. In the US, we don't get that car. We get the Scion IA or the Toyota IA, however you want to phrase that. But the nice thing about it is it's lightweight, it's simple, it doesn't take up a lot of space, and you could easily rip this out if you wanted to race. Your vents are all manually controlled. It's just a level of simplicity all throughout this cabin where you know shit is not going to break. You're not going to have to deal with this in the long term. There's no automatic climate control. You just have simple knobs. There's no capacitive touch. And even on the base model of this car, there is no infotainment. There's no touch screen. It's just an old-fashioned volume knob and a couple buttons here to control all that, which is, you know, if you want a no bullshit car, this is it. Now, if you're somebody who's not all about the driving experience and just being connected with the car, and you're looking for practicality, storage, comfort, adjustability, that's not the 124. In fact, it's one of the biggest negatives about this car. I said right from the very start, there's a level of practicality that is here in terms of its size. You can fit it in so many spots. But when you get in here, there's so many negatives that prevent it from becoming that daily driver for some people. Neither door has storage pockets. In fact, there is no attempt at creating usable storage in here for your nooks and crannies. You pretty much have to throw everything on the floor or in these ridiculously small cubbies, like your armrest. I can barely fit my glasses in there, or I can't fit my phone there, obviously. The only storage is right behind your elbow, and it's very hard to get in and out of there. And you're gonna notice this the first time you get in here. See for yourself if you can really live with some of the trade-offs. Last but not least, this is the best and the worst part about this car is the interior. And if you are a certain body type, you immediately get a penalty. You get a penalty for being too tall because these seats don't go back far enough if you're over 6'3". If you have a bigger frame or you are overweight, you will feel absolutely suffocated and uncomfortable. If you are a female with natural or wider hips and kind of a normal body type, you're gonna kind of feel squeezed in here and just kind of claustrophobic. This vehicle favors those who are shorter, skinnier, just more petite overall, male or female. You're gonna feel extremely good in here. But again, that's the biggest trade-off. It is not for everybody. And it's one of those cars you absolutely have to get in and spend a pretty decent test drive to know if these pillars are gonna work for you, if the overall size, the storage capacity, seating comfort, and just ergonomics are gonna drive you nuts over the life of the car or not. We're under the Fiat 124 Spider.
Do they make a non-Spider?
No, they don't. This is it. But you get several different trim levels, which I'd be the most interested in the Abarth. Because that way you don't get an exhaust and you get to hear the rumble of this 4-cylinder. But first, before we go over this, I've brought this Fiat in with a very special feature today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, check engine light.
Oh, yes.
Oh, fuck off. Why would you need to find the OBD2 connector?
To check your MIL status. It's made in Japan.
Ooh.
It's not an Italian car. Surprised you don't have a trunk full of Italian sausages.
You're just going to run an auto scan?
Yeah, because I don't have a current update for this car. Codes found 1.
Coolant thermostat. Did it get freeze frame data?
This is freeze frame right here. It says the light was triggered at 149 degrees.
So what was that code all about?
Low coolant temperature.
I've been smelling coolant on this thing. I wonder if it's got a leak.
Stop driving it so hard.
Do you think it's a thermostat?
Usually is.
Not my problem.
But there have been GMs where the thermostat was defective and the rubber would lodge in there and lock it open on newer cars. So.
But let's get to the meat and potatoes here. We are under this vehicle, which is completely manufactured by Mazda of Hiroshima, Japan. This is a Miata with some Mopar parts strapped to it. What did you see?
Some Mopar shocks. I think that's all I saw Mopar for now.
Oh,
Mopar windshield.
Windshield.
Exhaust.
Yeah, they use glass, the official Mopar glass. So
it's premium.
So you're paying premium prices. Now let's get right to the most important part about this, the most positive aspect of this car. This has got to be the most advanced chassis design for the price. Pretty much, it's unbelievable what they did here for this car's $24,000. So what you get here compared to all these other compact pile cars, even pretty much anything under $50,000, you don't see this level of chassis design, from aluminum to aero to double wishbone, just to the thought of the bracing and the weight reduction.
That's your dream come true. Aluminum control arms.
Yep. Full alignment capability, as Dave Coleman corrected me from the Miata video. It does have caster adjustment. You just have to wiggle it a little bit to get what you want out of it. But you have full alignment capability in the front and in the back, which means if you're taking this to a track, if you're really serious about driving it, having all of that in a stock car is really cool and very important to have. So that's here. And again, for $24,000, there's nothing that touches this. So in the middle, we have structural bracing. All Mazda's aluminum, they're X-bracing that they've modified, changed, lightened the weight of it. You have the, what do they call this? It's not the torque tube. They have some name for it, Mazda's own internal name, and I know somebody's going to complain that I don't know the name of it, but it's a chassis brace.
Yeah, I forget the name. They used to have that on the Camaros.
Yeah. It's just the Mazda's own version, which is lighter weight, more rigid. It ties the entire drivetrain together all the way back to the rear subframe and the rear differential. And it's there to create balance with the car. They've designed it so that it's kind of an anti-vibration device as well. But what you will note is that Mazda decided not to use the Skyactiv manual transmission in this car from the ND. This is the manual trans from the NC Miata, the previous gen. And that is because supposedly it handles more torque for the turbo motor. Handles more torque because the previous motor was a little bit more powerful. But anyway, this transmission is amazing to drive. It feels great. It's just not as lightweight as the ND Miata trans. As we come to the back, rear wheel drive, right wheel drive. This is the
real wheel drive.
Yes. And again, this is more Mazda with some changes that Fiat Chrysler's made to the dampers and the springs.
They've made it a gentler ride.
They made it a more firm ride.
Did they really?
Yes.
Wow.
It's a firmer, dampened car with less body roll. However, when you really drive it, you realize there is still compliance. There's a lot of compliance in the chassis. It just sets faster than the ND Miata. It seems to kind of roll and then set a lot quicker. But I'm going to talk about stuff when we're driving this car because after driving it and driving enough cars now, there's something that bothers me a lot about the way that this is.
The radio?
No, I love the radio. I wish it just had a huge screen on it. If you want to learn more about the Fiat 124's rear suspension and all this, I hate to mention this, but check out the Miata, ND Miata video that we did last year because a lot of it's carryover and there's a ton of detail that applies to this chassis as well. But let's take a look under the hood.
The bonnet?
The bonnet. Under the hood, Scott, the Fiat 1.4 liter.
1.4 monster.
I think, looking at this is a recycled engine from the other Fiats. You're going to find this in the 500. This is kind of their global motor that they've stuffed in here. I think for the most part, if somebody's never going to drive this hard, they're only going to have it as a weekend putter car and just kind of they want a convertible. This is probably the ideal setup because it feels faster than it is when you're just kind of putting around until you start driving it hard. But you have the benefit here of you have more torque than the Mazda, and you can retune this. And with retuning
there's a lot of potential.
There's a lot more potential than what you get out of the Mazda 2-liter, at least right now, stock versus stock. So I'd be curious to see what people start doing with this, with flashes, reflashes, and it might actually be a really fun car to drive, more so than the Miata with just the simple tuning. If you are a driving enthusiast, the first thing you're going to notice is the manual transmission in this car. It is amazing. You can forget about all the preconceived notions that automatics are faster because when you get inside here and you feel how quickly you're able to get up and down the gears, heel to toe, all the fun things drivers do, it's amazing. Now, in terms of driving dynamics, the Alpha 4C is really soft feeling. It feels a little bit more controlled than the MX-5 or the ND Miata, but the way this suspension is set up is roll and then set, which means it feels extremely comfortable for the street but you feel like you're always riding on top of the suspension. You don't feel very connected to the car itself. This is one of the least edgy rear-wheel drive cars you're ever going to get in. What that means is it's super easy to drive. I mean, there's times where I feel like the car is starting to lose its rear end, and I'll make a correction, it'll unsettle it even more. It almost invites you not to correct it. The car seems to just have so much balance and body control that you really don't have to do that. This would be a perfect learning tool for somebody that's getting in a car like this for the first time, or any rear-wheel drive car. You have to be doing something so stupid to get this car to oversteer, especially from a start. I can't even get it sideways in first gear, full throttle. And again, it makes it a great car for somebody who is just starting to learn not only manual transmission, but getting behind a rear-wheel drive car. It is so neutral and so balanced. Now, the other part of this car, specifically the Fiat 124, is this turbocharged motor. And one of the big negatives here is when you go and give it large and you shift hard into second, third gear, you always lose boost between shifts. I cannot keep the boost up in this car, no matter how I shift. If I slightly hold the throttle in between shifts, if I shift earlier, it's always falling off until you get the boost back. And it's a frustrating part of having a turbocharged car like this. One of the nicest things about this vehicle is, the open top experience. I mean, it's not totally about performance. It's not totally about going balls to the wall, even though you can go flat out in this car on the street. It's about experiencing everything around you. And I said this about the NC Miata. There's so much to be said about driving joy when you can be connected with the environment, and this allows you to do it in a comfortable way. You don't feel like you're going to be totally beat up in here either. Again, this gearbox is one of the best things about this car. It's unbelievable how fast you can upshift and downshift. If you didn't lose the boost, it would be so much better. I mean, getting back on, downshifting, heel-to-toe downshifts are so rewarding in here. But there's way too much roll. There's too much body slop in this car. And again, it is not edgy enough for me. If you're somebody that is more adept at car control and you've been in a lot of faster cars and you know how to get the car to rotate to do what you want, this is way too easy to drive. It's not going to offer the challenge that you need. And I think that's one of the most negative parts. You'd almost have to take this car and totally change out the suspension on here to get it how you want it. But then, of course, then you're going to be wanting for more power as well, which even with the turbocharger in here, you get more torque, but you lose so much of it at the high end. When you rev this thing out, it just falls flat and you hit the fuel cutoff so soon. It's best for just kind of daily driving, putting around, going like 80%, because all the torque is right at the beginning and then the fun ends. The brakes are really good in here. You can tell there's a slightly metallic pad in here, and you hear the squeal once in a while, but they always give you confidence, which is nice when you're driving flat out, especially on the street. But the biggest thing about the Fiat 124, and of course the ND Miata, is this is a street car. And they designed this specifically and tuned the suspension for some of the harsher roads. You'd never feel like this is a choppy ride. It is not over dampened, it is on the softer side. And Mazda said, most of the best roads are not well maintained. And you can still go out on a back road that's beat the hell up and still have a lot of fun and the suspension will take it. It will still maintain grip, and that's one of the biggest parts about this car. They know how to set up suspensions for the street, but if you're looking for more, you got to go elsewhere or modify the hell out of this. The conclusion. So what's better, the 124 or the MX-5? Well, there's really two parts to that. The big one is styling. I can't judge that for you. You're gonna have to decide on your own. Fiat reliability, and I talked about this in the last video, and some people are gonna argue with it, but statistically speaking, Fiat has not been known for the reliability. They're working on it. So that's something to note about this motor, and the fact that I already had a check engine light in 300 miles of driving. So take that for what it's worth. Know what you're getting into, but one thing you can count on, this is a dedicated chassis and platform built from the ground up to be a driver's car. It is not a bastardized compact car platform with thrown on, added on go fast parts after the fact. You are guaranteed to have one of the best driving experiences on the 124 out of anything out there for $24,000 for this car. It's really unbeatable.